Maud was beginning to wonder if she had inhaled some sort of tiny festival drum as the pounding in her head became more and more apparent as her morning went on. Maud shut her eyes, fingers pressing against her temples. She hadn't had this bad of a hangover since her freshman year, a dreadful morning filled with agonizing body pains and an overwhelming urge to sink into her mattress never to be seen again. But she couldn't hole herself up in the house all day. It wasn't good to not get in her daily vitamin D. At least, that's what her mother instilled in her. She didn't know where she found the energy to still put on a bit of makeup before heading out, but Maud knew a part of her would simply not allow it. So, unfortunately, Maud found herself doing her daily walk around campus. Usually a jog, but Maud had to be kind to herself somehow. Her hair slicked back into a neat high ponytail, the long pink fur-trimmed coat flapping behind her in the morning breeze. The only thing that seemed to make her feel even remotely human was the iced coffee in her hand. The sound of ice inside her cup, like those sped-up Lego building videos Maud often watched before bed. Bed. God, how excited Maud was to finally be back in it. As Maud walked through the campus, quietly wishing she were still in her pajamas, her ears caught wind of a few passing conversations. From what Maud could make out, Alicia last night had fought with a guy before taking some poor girl home, but from the lack of a stranger standing in their kitchen wearing one of Alicia's sleeping shirts, of which Maud had witnessed many women wear now, it seemed unlikely. Alicia wasn't in her bed this morning either, so did she go to the girl's apartment? Though Maud distinctly remembered Alicia cursing under her breath as she went off to get her water. For a moment, the sound of the leaves rustling took the lead. Maud continued to walk past a group of 2 guys and a few girls. In the huddled whisper, she picked up, No, that was her." She paused. Maud's eyes widened. Shit! Maud took off in a speed walk. How could she not have thought about it sooner? The girl Alicia took home? The fighting with some guy? The memory of her dress zipper sliding all the way down panged into her mind, to Maud's horror. Her face burned red. Oh God, did we? Caught up in her whirlwind of thoughts, Maud turned the corner. Her feet stopped themselves as she nearly collided with another body. The red hair and short stature, Maud did not have to guess who it was. She took off her shades to get a better look. The walk of shame. Ugh. She'd slept in way too long to make it back before general student activity started, so now she had to parade her way back with messy hair and a neck covered in hickeys. At least her drunk self had been smart enough last night to bring some basic toiletries and clothing along, so she wasn't still wearing yesterday's clothes and didn't smell like an alley next to a bar, but it's not like she looked her best either. Her oversized gray hoodie at least did its best to cover up her activities of the previous night and the battered shell that was her body alongside it. God, she needed a nap. She had scrounged together some cash to dump into one of the vending machines and was sipping on some kind of Capri Sun knockoff tropical juice. Emphasis on was, because the juice packet had been knocked out of her hand and had made itself closely acquainted with the tiles. She sighed. She was too foggy after last night to get properly mad, but she could manage cranky. Oh, for fuck's... Can you go play Olympics somewhere else, you... She looked up properly to meet her vanquisher of breakfast juices, only to find the exact face she had fled from the night before. The anger more drooped off her face rather than fell off of it, as she unenthusiastically greeted the girl. Oh, hey Pinky. Did alcohol make you clumsier too? Clearly still frustrated about her juice, but unwilling to get into a shouting match, especially not with Maud of all people. Maud gathered her enthusiasm. Alicia, you... It didn't take much to notice the blue and purple marks that lined Alicia's neck like a pearl necklace, each one deeper in shade than the last. Maud gasped, fingers over her lips. Did she do that? Was Alicia so embarrassed by last night that she fled Maud's bedroom before Maud could even wake up? Was she so horrified that she was simply acting like nothing happened between them? Was she in such a hurry that she didn't care if she looked like she'd been a test subject for a brand new wave pool? Maud searched her memory, trying to push through the muddy waters of last night's events. Maud tried to recount the events slowly. All she remembered was Alicia setting her down on the bed, her laying down beside her, Maud removing her dress, and Alicia pushing her face into the pillow. Maud's face flushed in the colors of summer roses. A horrified expression painted her face, like watching a train wreck you couldn't pull your eyes away from. How could Maud possibly forget such a thing? Oh my god, did we? Her eyes gestured to the hickeys. Did I do? She gasped once more, mouth agape as she removed the shades from her perfectly smoothed hair, pressing her palm to her aching temple. Oh my god, did we? Alicia did not hide her confusion at Maud's sudden sense of panic. But slowly a light bulb flickered on, and two emotions began to battle for dominance. One, the overwhelming need to prod at the fire, to fuel the flame, to make this 100 times worse, just to see the reaction. The other, the immediate and powerful need to defend herself, to protect her reputation, to grasp at the scraps of her image that were being ripped away in front of her, just like they were all that time ago. The second emotion obviously won. What? Augustine, no. I don't make a habit of forcing myself on wasted stray girls. What do you take me for? These are from... She sighed. Why was she trying to explain herself? Like it matters. You owe me a juice, Pinky. That and a new set of arms. Do you have any idea how heavy you are? Recentered. Set straight. A small fire rekindled, however, now with much more room to breathe. Though, wow, Augustine. I had no idea you thought about me that way. After all that big talk and those petty insults, too. Is that your way of flirting? A smirk formed on her face. Despite her lack of makeup and the bags under her eyes, Alicia still managed to make her eyes glimmer with mischief. Maud scoffed. Standing up straight, she turned her face away from Alicia, her pale pink ponytail flicking onto her shoulder as she did so. Of course I don't. Don't be ridiculous. If someone held a gun to my head and told me to think about you sexually, I'd tell them to tell my family I love them. She took another sip of her coffee. Right. Of course. There was no way she would have actually let herself be physical with Alicia. She should have never doubted herself. Her eyes wandered toward Alicia's arm, remembering the night before and how much she felt Alicia's arm shaking by the time they arrived back home. Maud chewed on her lips slightly. But I am sorry for making you carry me all the way. And I am not that heavy. Her eyes narrowed down at Alicia. Quickly, she rid herself of the harsh gaze, flipping her ponytail slightly. The spilled juice on the ground caught her attention once Alicia had mentioned it. Her lips pursed together before she spoke. I do suppose I owe you breakfast. Let's go then. I was going to order in anyway. I'll treat you. It's the least I could do. She slid her sunglasses back on. I have a killer headache. Alicia shrugged and rolled her shoulders. Finally, some gratitude. I'd have thought you were incapable of it. She grinned at the taller girl, mouth already watering at the idea of breakfast. Oh man, she was going to eat so many goddamn hash browns. Thank you for bringing me home. Ugh, stupid-ass memory ruining her fun. Okay, whatever. She knew gratitude was possible with Maud, but not with sober Maud. If she started attributing qualities to people based on how they were drunk, she'd know several Olympic tree climbers, an actual real-life vampire, 3 acrobats, a dozen or so world champion MMA fighters, and 1 dog trapped in the body of a human. Just because she was all timid and sweet one time whilst drunk did not do anything to better Maud's image in her head. As they began to walk, Alicia chimed in. "Oh, you can thank me for it being just a headache. With how wasted you got, I'm surprised you're up and walking. Half of me expected to come back home to a corpse." She laughed at herself, clearly, despite being groggy, being in a much better state than Maud was. "And, by the way, I'd love for you to show me a girl who could carry you for that long, that far, with you squirming for half of the journey without issue. It was fucking impressive, actually. I'm practically modern-day Hercules. If Hercules had horribly sore arms the day after he defeated the Hydra." "Oh, right. I remember you bringing me water. Thank you for that." Maud began to search through her phone's delivery app, limp wrist at her side, holding her coffee. "I'm surprised I'm awake too, to be honest. I don't remember much from last night, but I do remember downing several red Solo cups, so..." A shiver went straight up her spine. "God, and the shots too." It was truly a miracle that Maud even had the energy to open her eyes this early in the day. As foggy as her memory was, she did recall Alicia making her sit up to drink water. She only hoped that Alicia wouldn't hold this against her in the future. "I mean, that one girl offered to take me home." Maud started, not looking up from her phone. "What was her name? Jessie, I'm pretty sure." She sighed, tilting her head at her phone slightly. "But I went off to the bathroom and completely forgot about it, so probably not meant to be." It barely took her a moment before she switched the topic, handing her phone down to Alicia as they continued walking. "Here, pick what you want from the menu. I already placed my order in." Jessie. The name shot a pang through her brain, but she would not let it show, as the abject stare of horror rapidly mutated into one of confusion. She took the phone, but was not at all looking at the menu. She drilled her eyes into the side of Maud's face before repeating, "Meant to be." She leaned in towards Maud, a smug grin climbing across her face. "Meant to be? Meant to be? Don't tell me that Miss Maud Augustine is considering fighting for the other team. Is she crossing the street? Has Sappho cast her seductive spell on you because even she realized how badly you needed to get laid? She cackled, a spell of dizziness washing over her due to the sleep deprivation and the lack of oxygen, snorting and giggling in a very unflattering way. Clearly, she was not trying to impress this morning. She looked down at the phone, finally, and scrolled through the various items, adding like 4 separate orders of hash browns to the cart. She needed oil and potatoes in her life right now, or she would surely wither away. She made sure to throw a tropical smoothie in there, too, for good measure. "I mean, she's a nice girl. Seems that way, at least. Clearly she was worried about you. You could always go find her and be all like, 'Oh my god, Jessie, thank you so much for protecting me from the very scary 5-foot-tall lesbian. Could I make it up to you by buying you a coffee sometime? Ooh, 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 ooh.' Or, however you go about it." She bumped her shoulder against Maud's teasingly. "She's in the swim team, you know. I bet she knows all too well how to loosen up, which is great, because you desperately fucking need that." Maud didn't need to know how she felt about that girl, or about anything that happened. Jessie probably had forgotten all about it anyways, and it's not like she expected this to go anywhere. She just found it infinitely amusing that she had a possible identity crisis on her hands, and she would do everything she can to make it messy. Because, hey, rude awakenings were the most effective, right? She was worried about her? A small, fluttering feeling sprung up inside Maud's stomach. Alicia's laugh was oddly relaxed. Maud rolled her eyes, taking another sip of her coffee as it slowly soothed the ache in her temples. "Oh, shut it. I don't know if it's just the fact that you want to woo any woman who has a pulse, but I personally think you're reading way too into it." She remembered the way the strong green light hit Jessie's curls, the way it wound between each curve, and her smile perfectly straight like a row of gravestones. She remembered Jessie's firm hand on her forearm as Maud began to stumble slightly from the alcohol. A light tint of pink dusted her cheeks at the swim team comment, but she quickly played it off as she cleared her throat. Even Maud had to admit she was an attractive woman. She was really nice, though. I think she put her number in my phone, but... Maud's eyebrows furrowed, a small pout on her lips as she thought hard to remember, but most memories of the night were left as blank as printing paper. Ugh, I know I probably had a fun time, but it'd be great if I could remember more than half of it. A small group came into Maud's view, just by the set of brightly painted vending machines. One boy looked awfully familiar. It only took a few moments for the memory to finally click into place like the gap in a puzzle. It was Luke. A muddy memory flashed into her mind of Alicia staring him down as the words "fucking bitch" left his mouth. Her eyebrow twitched. Maud glanced down at Alicia. Maud wouldn't candy coat it. Alicia did not look her best. Not horrifyingly similar to a dried-up tumbleweed, but still not as presentable. Surely, with the colorful language Luke was so cozy in using, there was no doubt he would have no issue spouting foul words against Alicia's appearance. It wasn't as if she looked like this all the time. Clearly she had a better night than he did. He had no room to talk about her appearance, but men were funny like that, always taking up more room than they should have. With Alicia's current mood, any sly comments would surely result in a fight. Without another word, Maud quickly finger-combed through Alicia's hair, smoothing it down the best she could. She removed her sunglasses, promptly putting them on Alicia to cover any dark circles from a short night's sleep. Maud cleared her throat. One moment she was perusing the menu for different types of muffins. The other, hands were roughly pulled through her hair and she was nearly poked in the eye by one of the sunglasses' arms. Hey, Pinky, what's gotten into you? I'm not your tall amphibious girl crush. Would it kill you not to tear my hair out? She grumbled, passing the phone back to Maud, utterly puzzled at the weird burst of sudden touchiness. Was she trying to mother her or something? Come on, she wasn't that irresponsible. She could take care of herself just fine. I'll clean myself up at home. What the fuck are you... Her eyes followed Maud's, locking on to the cause of the erratic and sudden makeover attempt. She took off the sunglasses almost immediately to get a better look. Oh yeah, she'd almost forgotten. She handed the sunglasses back to Maud. No need to break them if this gets bad, after all. She waltzed confidently over to the group, crossing her arms and looking up at Luke, expectant and judgmental look in her eyes. After all that fussing, it seemed as though it were utterly useless. Maud watched as Alicia began to stride up to the group, cocky manners now in full swing. She felt the thumping in her temples only persist harder. Alicia! Alicia! But it was too late. Maud took in a deep breath, straightening her posture as she slid the sunglasses neatly onto her head. Morning there, Lucy. Layton. Lark. What was your name again? Oh, whatever. She waved a hand in the air, almost dismissing any attempt at correction before it even happened. I believe you owe me an apology. Here, I'll start with mine. Sorry for calling you dickweed before I had assessed whether you were, in fact, dickweed. The next time you creep on a drunk girl, I'll wait for the insults before I start hurting your fragile ego. She smiled. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. With how pushy this guy had been to a clearly uninterested, clearly inebriated girl, dickweed was an incredibly tame insult. But she had to make it seem like she had at least somewhat thought about it. Not that she expected anything positive out of this. She kind of wanted it not to be, if she was honest. Just a little bit. She'd really like to show this guy how it really feels to have a stick up the ass. Oh, and an apology for my roommate, too, if you will. The irritatingly boastful voice cut through the morning air like a harpoon through still waters. The group fell into silence as Alicia approached, one of them tapping Luke on the shoulder. Luke lowered his gaze down towards Alicia with a narrow glare. A sigh left him once Alicia finished her spiel. He raised an eyebrow, glancing towards Maud, who stood confidently by Alicia's side, arms folded and chin raised. Luke let out a small laugh, looking off to the side for a moment.
You know what? I really don't have anything to apologize for. I was just trying to get her home, and you were the ones who had to make it all fucking weird.
His eyes drifted to Maud.
She's not even that hot anyway. Don't flatter yourself.
Maud raised her eyebrows, lids relaxed. You know, that would hurt a lot more if I actually cared about what you thought of me. But I wouldn't talk so big for someone who... Maud tilted her head, an obnoxious, condescending smile on her face. Is clearly not. Luke's face faltered for a moment before he tried to scoff it off. A fragile mask of confidence and annoyance dawned onto his face as his expressions became more and more riddled with irritation. He looked down at Alicia.
Why don't you and your little pink poodle just mind your own business, huh, short stack?
Alicia laughed explosively, a cackle bursting from her chest as Luke retorted, and Maud straight up insulted him. God, it's so funny how guys only call girls unattractive after they've gotten rejected. If you thought she was actually unattractive, why were you draped across her shoulders like a thrift store boa? She took a step closer to Luke, a challenging grin still present on her face, but now with a dangerous fire flickering behind the eyes. She would love to go in further on the poodle comment, something about how poodles are meant to be well behaved, but she did not want to give him any more support he was already getting from his pathetic little man posse. Oh, but here's the thing, Lake. It is my business. This girl told you no, very clearly, and you decided to pick a fight about it with me, of all people. She looked at her nails for a moment, aloof. Despite her current messy appearance, she was oozing confidence. So, I'm going to need that apology. If you want to do it in written format, that's alright too, but it better be more than 500 words. You won't like my alternative teaching methods, I can promise you that. She looked up again. It's bad enough that I have to pick up the slack every time you leave a girl unsatisfied. Someone has to do it. Luke scratched the back of his neck in an irritable fashion. He stared down at Alicia harshly, glancing back at Maud, who still looked positively smug. He was not unaware of Alicia's reputation and her promise to follow up. Many times has he seen others, or even his friends, walk away from Alicia with a bloody nose. That's only if they're lucky enough to leave with just that much. Other times she had seen full-blown black eyes and swaying bodies like sailors on a stormy sea. And then there was Maud. He barely knew anything about her other than her bite was certainly one she was not afraid to throw around. A good few pairs of eyes were beginning to attract the scene, but Maud still stood proud, arms crossed against her chest as she tried to ignore the ache in her neck. Did you not just hear what she said? She said to give an apology. Come on now, quickly, quickly, Maud taunted. Luke's nose twitched as he clicked his tongue in annoyance. He let out a groan, glaring down at them.
Yeah, whatever. I'm sorry, alright? Jesus fuck.
He sighed, running a hand through his hair.
I'm sorry. You happy now, for fuck's sake? Whatever, come on guys, this is such bullshit.
Luke cut his way through the group, stomping off. A couple people began to whisper. So much commotion for 9 a.m. Alicia smugly watched as they stomped off, combing a hand through her messy hair to sweep the bangs out of her face and turning back towards Maud with a wide, self-satisfied grin. And that is how you do it. She winked, then turned to the rest of the crowd that had been staring. She put her hands on her hips and sneered. If you want a picture, save it for the meet and greet. Go on, move along. Nothing to see here. Masculinity show is over. She stuck her hands in the pockets of her hoodie, huffing with a content energy about her. She felt good about that. She had a feeling they'd think twice the next time they're at a party with her and decide to abduct some girl. She elbowed Maud before continuing to walk. Thanks for the backup, Poodles. You are a great crime movie yes-man. A compliment shrouded in about 3 insults, but a compliment nonetheless. Alicia knew now for sure Maud put her money where her mouth was, and that was a quality far too uncommon around these parts. Maud scrunched her nose up at poodles. She knew a compliment was weaved into that response, but it was deathly overshadowed by the 3 other insults that surrounded it. Men, Maud scoffed. Nothing more needed to be said. The exasperation said it all. As they approached the house, Maud's body finally began to relax, but her mind was still racing from the confrontation. I remember now during the party, Maud began, taking her shoes off as she left them by the door. She slipped her keys neatly onto their key hanger, fuzzy pink keychains dangling in the morning light. He was trying to feel up on me, wasn't he? What an absolute creep. I think that's honestly why Jesse was standing so close to me, because he kept hovering around our area. Maud's skin crawled at the very idea of him, let alone his arm around her. She hated to admit it, but it was rather sweet how Alicia defended her back there. It wasn't special by any means. Clearly she had done this many, many times, but the act alone was sweet enough. Still, not special. Alicia's face soured at the confirmation from Maud. She couldn't be certain from the small window of interaction she got to witness at the party, but she had done some assuming and connecting dots to make a guess at a full picture. She had acted based on that assumption, but the confirmation certainly didn't do any favors for Alicia's opinion of the boy. There were a few men on her shit list on campus. Hell, there was an entire frat that she'd never trusted with any girl alone. It seems now she had to add this one to the list as well. It was a shame. He'd seemed non-threatening. But then again, not everybody can be like Dylan and Bryce. They shared only a single brain cell between the two, and they certainly weren't going to be winning any Nobel Prizes for changing the world, but at least they knew how to treat a girl and how to handle rejection. Plus, Bryce made a mean cocktail. The doorbell rang, indicating their delivery. Can you get that? That's the food I already paid, Maud called from the kitchen. Alicia snapped out of her thoughts. Got it. She opened the door, looked the delivery girl over, checked her nameplate, accepted the breakfast with a wink and a $10 tip, and then made her way inside again. The smell of hash browns already made itself pervasive through the living room, and she could feel her mouth watering already. She sat down at the table, beginning to scavenge through the bag to find what part of the orders were hers, and set the straw of the smoothie to her lips with a self-satisfied sigh. At least he knew his place. I've had guys swing at me for less. Once Maud returned from the sink, she settled in the dining chair, beginning to unwrap the breakfast sandwich, which emitted a fresh, warm smell. Upon digging in, she found heaven. A relieved sigh left her as her shoulders slowly came down from her ears, taking in a deep breath. That's good, she muttered, nodding to herself. After a moment of eating, she finally spoke up. Seeing that you had to literally carry me home because I got so belligerently drunk, I think it's safe to say that I had the more fun night, so... Maud shrugged, a smile on her face. I'm not saying I won, but yes, I absolutely am. Maud took another bite of her sandwich, looking proud at herself. In these moments, she seemed less serious, a little more free from the prison she created for herself. Sure, if you count being surrounded by frat boys encouraging you to drink into oblivion as fun, then you won first prize, party girl. She smirked smugly at Maud. But I'll give you this. You didn't pussy out as hard as I thought you would. And you hitting Mr. Consent over the head with your purse was pretty funny, so sure. I don't know if you know how to have fun, but you know how to go overboard and cause a massive scene, so that's half points. She took a bite out of a hash brown to accentuate her point, as she watched the girl across from her eat the sandwich closely. She wasn't as obnoxious as when she first thought. Fun and cute and interesting were different, but she was to some degree tolerable. Though, that was probably the hangover putting a leash on her. Also, Maud added when she finished the bite in her mouth, I might be coming home late today. I have a project I need to finish. I'm only telling you this because I will notice if you eat my ice cream in the freezer. Her eyes narrowed down at Alicia. And I don't care if you bring someone over. Just, for the life of me, Please stay in your room. I don't want another repeat of last time where I walked in on you going down on someone right on our couch. Our couch, Alicia. I sit there too.
Okay,
She said with her mouth still full of potato, leaning back in the chair and holding the wrapped hash brown in front of her, emerging from the sleeves of her hoodie, giving the impression of an overgrown bright red hamster. Get back to me when you've eaten someone out on a couch, and then maybe I'll actually listen. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. She took another bite. Or you're just too lazy to clean your room. She didn't comment on the ice cream. It fully depended on what type it was, because if she could get away with a small scoop, or maybe she should move it to a different spot in the freezer so it looks like she ate it. A small smirk grew on her face as she imagined Maud frantically opening drawers in a rage to find her ice cream. But yeah. She swallowed, chasing with a sip of smoothie. Good luck playing fashion. For a moment, Maud wondered if there was a single bone in Alicia's body that could have possibly been sincere. Everything that came out of her mouth always felt to be a ghost written by something else. Sarcasm, pride, judgment. Perhaps this was simply how she went about her life. Maud wondered how it felt for Alicia to constantly be connecting with others, yet not at all. Though she could be completely wrong about that. Maud rolled her eyes at Alicia's comments about the couch incident. You are so... Maud groaned, shaking her head as she turned her attention back towards her food. The sky soon deepened into the early morning hours of 1 a.m. The campus cicadas began their jazz-like rhythm that buzzed all throughout the student housings and late-night street lamps. Their front door clicked open. Maud stepped through, her eyes blank and expression stale. The day weighed heavy. Her feet carried her into the kitchen, barely giving Alicia a moment's notice as her hands busied themselves through the cabinets. There was a small shuffling before she pulled out a few espresso pods from the drawer. She could hear Alicia's voice, but she couldn't exactly hear it. There were words, sure. Words that Maud knew she should pay more attention to, but for now she simply stayed quiet, trying to keep herself busy as she began the usually early morning process of making her coffee. Her back was turned to Alicia, ever so quiet. Hey, Pinky. Did you get your extra credit good girl points? Alicia was, like usual, sat on the couch in a way that it was not meant to be sat on, legs draped over the armrest with the rest of her body vegetating amidst the cushions. A blanket was curled around her, crumpled and messy, having gone through the throes of being put on, taken off, and put on again several times. No response. She arched an eyebrow as Maud went to the kitchen, staring at the back of her head as she fiddled with the coffee machine. She looked at her phone. 1 a.m.? Coffee? Did you hit your head, Augustine? Coffee at 1? Really? She got up from her position on the couch, legs swinging to support her body as she slowly meandered her way to the kitchen, crossing her arms and leaning against the wall on the side, observing from a slight distance. Run all out of fashion juice or something? Alicia's voice nagged at the back of her. Is this what she felt every day? With a few beeps, the coffee whirred to life. In almost an instant, the house began to fill with a strong scent of caffeine. It wafted through the air like a ghost in a cemetery. Maud held the counter firmly, still not saying a word as Alicia drew closer. Hello, Earth to Maud. Alicia snapped her fingers a few times, trying to break her roommate loose from whatever strange spell she had been put under. She blew air out through her nose as if something was very funny. You know, you're high-strung enough without the second dose of straight caffeine. Are we angling for a breakdown tonight, or... She set a few steps forward, leaning her arm on the counter and putting her face forcibly in Maud's eyesight. Cold shoulder, Augustine? You wound me. You know, I haven't even touched your ice cream. Much? She smiled, trying to do what she always did around Maud. Prod for a reaction. Honestly, anything would be better than this weird, silent, gloomy thing she was doing. It made her uncomfortable. As Alicia forced her face into Maud's vision, she could finally see the source of all the silence. Maud, eyes focused on the coffee pot like her life depended on it. Her plump lips crumpled up into themselves like a discarded note. Her eyebrows knitted together. Giant dollops of tears flowed endlessly from her cheek. It was too much. It was all far too much now. The headache, the confrontation, the body pains, Alicia's teasing, and now this? Maud's throat knotted. Her eyes prickled intensely as her nose seemed to pinch itself from the inside. Maud sniffled as her nose shone a bright red. Her arms were too frozen now to even try to wipe her eyes. A small sound came from her as she tried to stifle her sobs, but nothing helped. Her knuckles were now white from how hard she held onto the countertops. Why did Alicia have to prod? Why now? Why couldn't she have just been asleep or been with some girl who she'd leave once the early morning stretched its arms over the hills? More and more tears just seemed to flow out of her like a broken sink. "Whoa," was all Alicia said at first. She seemed legitimately shocked at the idea of Maud crying at all. She was so used to the reactive, confident, bratty side of her that this just seemed completely wrong somehow. Like a whole different person was in front of her. Like she'd been talking to someone who she thought was Maud the whole time, but they turned around and it turned out their hair looked the same from the back, but their faces were vastly different. "Whoa, hey, it's okay. I didn't actually touch your ice cream. I was just joking. She brought up her hand, considering putting it on Maud's shoulder for a second, but not having enough follow-through to make the decision. At least she had been good at comforting certain people who she knew already felt safe with her, where all she had to be was a shoulder fit for crying and a comforting voice. With Maud, she had no idea where she stood, what to expect, what to do with her hands. Every possible action seemed like a boundary crossed, every touch like a violation. It wouldn't make sense for them to be so compassionate towards each other, so what do you do in this situation? Was it something I said? Did the assignment go bad or something? She felt like a fish out of water, and God, did it show on her face. Her voice softened a little bit, but the characteristic smugness hadn't fully left it yet. The smirk had dropped from her face, which now settled into an expression of discomfort and tension. She was torn between being stuck in her standard persona and trying to soften herself, but only managing to get halfway there. It's my project," Maud squeaked out. Her voice was uncharacteristically soft, her shoulders shaking like a shaken champagne bottle on New Year's Eve. Every single part of her screamed to keep it in. Don't cry. Don't cry. Don't cry. Especially not in front of Alicia. What would she make of Maud if she let her see her break down like this? Pathetic in the deafening silence of midnight oil burning. Maud's throat tightened even further as she pushed the feelings further and further into her stomach. My project is... She began, trying to speak slowly to prevent any more tears, but it was ultimately useless. Maud burst into tears, palms pressing against her eyes as she finally let herself fold into the emotion. The tears were hot, like water from a screaming kettle. Maud gathered herself once more to speak. Luke and some fucking idiots tore my paper dress project, which took me so long to make, and I have to submit it tomorrow. Maud stuttered out through the tears. It's gonna take me all night to finish it because of the details, and my head hurts, and I'm just so tired. She squeaked the last bit out, sobbing into her hands as tears filled her palms. As Maud began sputtering, the process of softening seemed to win out over Alicia's features, as she looked at Maud's utter grief with legitimate, momentary empathy. Her eyes were big and worried, her eyebrows hunched and furrowed, the corners of her mouth somewhat downturned. And then she heard that name, and a shadow fell over her face. Her eyes sharpened, staying big but gaining a fiery intensity. Her mouth tightened, tension becoming visible as her breathing changed patterns to an uncharacteristically calm one. They went after her work? They tried to sabotage her career because she wouldn't fuck them? Were they literally 5 years old? No, calling them children was too generous. These guys were fucking primates. They were slime. They were absolute filth. Maud and her weren't friends, by no means. Hell, they were barely acquaintances. That would require being on somewhat good terms. Maud and her were entirely different animals living in the same enclosure. No touching points, no share traits, no chemistry. But she was her roommate. She went to the party after she challenged her to. She was targeted because of her actions this morning. She bought her breakfast, goddammit. She looked at the crying Maud, the image of her so fragile, so hurt, burning into her retinas. She hated seeing this. She absolutely despised it. It filled her with an anger unlike anything else. She wrapped her arms around Maud's shoulders quickly, forcefully, squeezing her into her collarbone. It's gonna be okay. This is never going to happen to you again, okay? I will fix this. We can talk to the teacher. She let go of the girl, only letting the hug last for a few moments before giving Maud an intense look. I'll be back later. I'm going for a walk. However unexpected, Alicia's hug was oddly comforting. Maud's eyes widened at the sudden gesture, something so genuine. Her hands slowly came up onto Alicia's back, resting on them as she let herself melt slightly into the hug. She was so warm. Maud knew she would regret this eventually, probably the moment Alicia left her, or even now at this very moment. She could conjure enough self-loathing to scold herself for even thinking of being vulnerable about such a silly thing. But she couldn't. Not right now. Now, her bones were tired. Her head thumped like a distant party's bass, and her eyes stung like ice against salt. Right now, her chest stuttered when it heaved. She nodded, trying to take in all of the reassuring words Alicia was saying. Maud let Alicia slip out of the hug, studying her face for a moment through her blurry vision. Alicia's expression was dark, as if shadowed in the back of an alley, a haunting mix of rage and thunderstorms. Okay, Maud croaked out, letting Alicia leave without another word in. Alicia briefly cupped Maud's face, hands stiff and strained, as if the fingers were threatening to pop out of their joints. She retracted them, fists balling up as she turned and made for the door, grabbing her jacket off of one of the hooks. She throws the door open and throws it closed with a slam once again. They were going to pay. They had avoided her direct wrath so far, but they were about to discover why she was the ace of the kickboxing club. They were about to discover why they shouldn't fuck with her girl. Or any girls. Didn't matter. Right now, her vision was red, and all she could think of was the face of that smug asshole, and how nice it would look in red and purples.